Hello and welcome to another episode of Skin Like a Rhino, the podcast by LV in which I, Tania and get to talk with some incredible female founders who are breaking old taboos and new ground. In today's episode, I am talking with Valentina Milanova, the founder and CEO of Daye. I first met Valentina in 2018 when she had the big vision around bringing better tech to women's health and particularly gynecological issues. In today's episode, we'll be talking about everything from why we get period pain through to endometriosis, vaginal microbiome, and femtech more broadly.
So what Daye is we are a manufacturer of medical and diagnostic devices for taboo topics in gynae health. We started with the world's first pain-relieving tampon and a big focus on primary and secondary dysmenorrhea. And then we added a further reinvention of the tampon to serve as an at-home self-collection tool in the context of vaginal infections, STIs, and human papillomavirus or HPV for cervical cancer prevention. Now, alongside the physical products we manufacture, we also have a virtual care platform which enables our patients to connect with vetted, empathetic physicians that can advise on a variety of gynecological health topics from fertility to menopause. And then we also have a prescription arm to the business that enables our patients to obtain, whether it's contraception or hormonal replacement therapy or vaginal infection treatments, just anything that you need from start to finish, from diagnosis to treatment, in order to manage your gynecological health adequately. And the reason why I felt inspired to start a company in the gynecological health space is, first of all, I've personally struggled with a lot of the issues that we're trying to resolve. And then second, and more importantly, beyond my personal experience, I do feel that women's health is one of the most important areas to be focused on and to solve for, because such a huge percentage of the population have their economic lives and their social lives and their overall well-being negatively impacted by the lack of innovation, the lack of solutions, and the lack of research in our space.
Couldn't agree more. And I think what makes Daye really stand out as well, when I've looked at sort of the other startups in the femtech space, is even within menstrual care, right? It tends to be more like a better designed.
So what Daye is we are a manufacturer of medical and diagnostic devices for taboo topics in gynae health. We started with the world's first pain-relieving tampon and a big focus on primary and secondary dysmenorrhea. And then we added a further reinvention of the tampon to serve as an at-home self-collection tool in the context of vaginal infections, STIs, and human papillomavirus or HPV for cervical cancer prevention. Now, alongside the physical products we manufacture, we also have a virtual care platform which enables our patients to connect with vetted, empathetic physicians that can advise on a variety of gynecological health topics from fertility to menopause. And then we also have a prescription arm to the business that enables our patients to obtain, whether it's contraception or hormonal replacement therapy or vaginal infection treatments, just anything that you need from start to finish, from diagnosis to treatment, in order to manage your gynecological health adequately. And the reason why I felt inspired to start a company in the gynecological health space is, first of all, I've personally struggled with a lot of the issues that we're trying to resolve. And then second, and more importantly, beyond my personal experience, I do feel that women's health is one of the most important areas to be focused on and to solve for, because such a huge percentage of the population have their economic lives and their social lives and their overall well-being negatively impacted by the lack of innovation, the lack of solutions, and the lack of research in our space.
Couldn't agree more. And I think what makes Daye really stand out as well, when I've looked at sort of the other startups in the femtech space, is even within menstrual care, right? It tends to be more like a better designed sanitary pad or so on, or maybe a better designed ergonomic tampon. But you're bringing a lot of science to it in the sense of data and analytics. But maybe just rewinding a little bit, what is it that attracts you to this space? And specifically, what is it from a sort of medical or scientific point of view? What were the big gaps in knowledge around this thing that most women go through for a large period of their lives?
Well, period pain, premenstrual syndrome, they were only recently recognized as medically valid conditions, and only recently did we realize what causes period pain. So for a very long time, we didn't understand the mechanism of action of period pain. There were lots of different theories around how it could be caused by inflammation or the cramping of the uterus. Now we know that what causes period pain is prostaglandins, which are these hormone-like substances which do provoke the uterus to contract and to shed the thickened endometrial lining, and they actually seep through the uterus and into the bowel and into your back, which is why a lot of people experience shooting pains down their legs on their period, or back pain, or digestive symptoms and diarrhea in some cases. Those are perfectly normal, and they have to do with the hormone-like substances that are released during our menstrual cycle. But to focus the conversation a bit more on period pain, I do think it's one of the biggest public health crises that we haven't at all recognized. So 90% of the population experience some level of period pain. And there's lots of different studies that, date back across the past few decades that show how big the economic cost of period pain is. So endometriosis costs the British economy over £2 billion every year. Women lose 150 million productive working days each year to unmanaged gynecological health symptoms. And the British Medical Journal tells us that the average person loses about 12 productive days each year to unmanaged period pain, primary and secondary dysmenorrhea. So I really feel that period pain is this, silent issue which plagues us all, but it's so trivialized. And on the other spectrum, it's such a taboo and stigmatized topic that we're trained from a very young age to just ignore our symptoms, to ignore our pain and grit our teeth through it. And I really feel we should be talking a lot more about the economic and societal consequences of teaching women and girls that they should just ignore their period pain.
But I mean, also this trivialization of women's pain, that goes also beyond, doesn't it? Period pain is what's known as the gender pain gap. And I think various studies have shown, haven't they, that women who present with the same symptoms as men, say abdominal pain or something in hospital, are likely to wait longer, and women are more likely to be given, say, antidepressants, right? Which I think the sense is that women's pain is in their head, right? Do you think that's part of why there's been a lack of research and a lack of attention? Because am I right in understanding that most women are just sort of given ibuprofen, right, for period pain?
Ibuprofen or paracetamol, and they're frequently ineffective at targeting the mechanism of action of period pain. So what happens, and a lot of people may have experienced this anecdotally, people overtake painkillers. So we as women, as AFAB individuals, we will go to a whole pack of ibuprofen or a whole pack of paracetamol during our cycle to try and compensate for the fact that we're not experiencing relief at the same rate as, for example, men are experiencing muscle cramp relief when taking ibuprofen. And we also know that for the female physiology to experience relief, any kind of pain relief through ibuprofen, we need a much higher dose. So the standard dose of ibuprofen, dose 250 milligrams, that dose was developed for the male physiology, tested on the male physiology, and it's effective on the male physiology, but it is significantly less effective on the female physiology. And what happens when you overtake painkillers, when you go above the recommended dose, is that you run into a whole host of side effects, from swelling of the face, swelling of the fingers, to more serious gastroenterological problems.
Well, yeah, on that latter point, also, I mean, I would have thought with the non-steroid anti-inflammatories like ibuprofen and aspirin, also on the microbiome, right? I know this also is an issue close to your heart, particularly the vaginal microbiome. But you're basically saying that they're not even working because they're not targeting the right mechanism. Are there treatments on the horizon which do target that? Are you saying this overproduction of prostaglandins? Like, what would be how would that affect in terms of what we could do in terms of medication or treatments?
We really need to personalize the pain relief approach that we take to every individual patient, also treatment approaches that are tailored to the individual and their specific health history and their specific health needs. So you mentioned aspirin. 30% of the population don't at all metabolize aspirin. So aspirin will not be helpful for them in any shape or form. And in women's health, in medicine as a whole, we prescribe the same dose, the same formulation of whether it's contraception or HRT or a painkiller to many different people with many different metabolomic profiles, people of different heights, different weights. And I'm very excited about how we can use AI technologies in order to personalize the medication and to also personalize the way in which we prescribe different pain relief routines. And that was the premise that we based the Daye period and pelvic pain clinic on. So instead of having the patient rely on one tool alone, whether it's ibuprofen or aspirin or a pain relieving tampon. We help them build a personalized pain management plan, which is based on what has worked for them in the past, what hasn't worked for them in the past, what their health history is, what they need to watch out for, so that they can rely on a whole arsenal of tools rather than be stuck with just one solution.
So just talk us through how, like, if I was a woman, I went on the Daye virtual pain clinic, how would it work? So there's this personalized element. Do I also talk to somebody, or just talk through what the sort of the user journey would be?
So we start with a clinical questionnaire. This questionnaire enables us to take your whole medical history, which then enables us to ensure that we don't recommend the wrong type of prescription for you, which might lead to side effects. In addition, we're able to help the patient quantify what tends to be considered very subjective experience, such as their level of period pain or how heavy their period is. So, for example, we give descriptions such as, is your pain bad enough so that you can't speak, or is it only preventing you from doing exercise or sports activities? That helps the patient understand exactly where they are within that clinical framework. And we do a similar exercise for your level of menstrual bleed. We show different pads with different levels of menstrual fluid saturation, which then helps you understand, okay, is this what your pad looks like after 2 hours of use? This then means that you have a very neat and systematized history of your symptoms and, anything that you have tried before that may or may not have worked for your particular physiology. And you can take this, 2-page summary to a specialist, or you can bring it to your GP, and then you're armed with your data and you're empowered to seek better care. We connect our patients with physicians that we have trained and physicians that we have vetted. We then interview them extensively. They have to go through a training to ensure that they are up to date on the latest clinical research, the latest in best clinical practice. And only then are they allowed to onboard onto the Dayve platform and start seeing patients. Once you see your specialist, they can further advise and they can further help you understand the root cause of your symptoms and how best to manage your symptoms. And then those providers can also prescribe treatments. So we prescribe a whole host of treatments from, personalized hormonal contraception to acupuncture. We also prescribe the LV pelvic floor trainer, because for people with chronic pelvic pain, strengthening your pelvic floor is actually one of the most effective forms of therapy.
And I can imagine, I mean, by the way, that's very impressive in terms of the comprehensiveness of that service. I didn't quite realize. And I can imagine you probably do need to train quite a few physicians, right? Because isn't there an issue, particularly here in the UK, that there's very few physicians trained in this area? I mean, we had the same thing with LV trainer. There's a real dearth of women's health physiotherapists. I was very pleased to hear recently that's beginning to change, partly because we're talking a lot more about pelvic health. But in terms of menstruation and the gynecological issues you've just mentioned, that is a real issue, isn't it? I mean, that's why it's taking so long for women to get diagnoses.
I mean, this is an issue across medicine as a whole, and I'm a big believer in us transitioning to a medicine 3.0 space where we have the patient come very informed about their condition. They take a very active stance and a very active approach to managing their condition. So I see medicine 3.0 as a place where the patient works alongside the physician rather than the physician always taking a higher kind of directive role. But yes, in the UK, so I'm Bulgarian, that's my background. And in Bulgaria, everyone has a gynecologist, and you go and see your gynecologist every 6 months, and you're on WhatsApp with your gynecologist, and, you will send them a picture of your discharge, or, you would ask them questions around, why is my period blood brown this month, or why is it black? And in most people's cases, your gynecologist is the person that helped your mother deliver you. So they have your whole, reproductive health history. So I was so shocked when I moved to the UK and it was my GP that was supposed to recommend contraception and give me my pap smear. I was just completely shocked. And the UK is one of the few countries in the world that has the system where it's your GP that's your primary care provider for women's health. So as a result, there is a significant lack of experts and expertise. And the way that medical education is structured in the UK it is not very focused on women's health at all. Endometriosis is not really taught. From what I know, medical students spend less than half a day on menopause, even though menopause will affect us for a huge percentage of our lives. So we do actually take it upon ourselves to help bridge that knowledge gap, and to get more physicians excited about delivering personalized gynecological care.
You mentioned the pain relieving tampons. This is the product I think I was most familiar with, which from what I understand is CBD covered tampons. Will you just talk us through a bit about the science and why CBD and evidence that can help in terms of symptoms?
Yeah, so CBD, cannabidiol, cannabis in general are very challenging as a research space. Industrial hemp has many different uses, ranging from textile to extracting cannabidiol for therapeutic purposes. And I was reading research papers on industrial hemp, and that's how I got excited about this idea for our first product, which is to create a tampon that is more absorbent, so it soaks up your menstrual fluid faster and it's smaller. You have a sponge-like texture. I was also reading research papers on the utility of the extract from the hemp plant for localized application and localized pain relief. So the research papers that I was focusing on had to do with patients that had oversized tumors, which couldn't yet be operated on. Patients in the study found relief from applying the cannabidiol extract onto their skin. So that's how I got introduced into the world of using cannabidiol for localized pain relief, and that's what really led me to want to have the intellectual curiosity to develop a pain relieving tampon. So when we deliver medications in women through the vagina, it means we bypass the digestive tract, automatically making a medication safer. And we also bypass the liver, which again makes medication safer. So when you use the vagina as a drug delivery mechanism, you can use a lower dose. You create a faster onset, so the medication works faster, and it's also safer. But the tampon now has been through 3 independent clinical trials demonstrating safety and efficacy, so demonstrating improved performance when it comes to menstrual pain relief compared to over-the-counter painkillers and compared to hormonal contraception, which is another tool that we frequently use to reduce period pain, but again, it's not effective in everyone. In terms of the efficacy rate, so we see efficacy in about 80 to 85% of the general population, so it will not work for everyone, but it does work for a much bigger majority compared to the 20 to 30% of people who find relief from over-the-counter painkillers.
80% is high. That's good.
Yeah.
As you said, compared to ibuprofen and aspirin, that's fantastic. I didn't know that then about the tampon or the vagina supposed to be good in terms of drug delivery, because we'll talk about that next. That you're looking at how to use the tampon as a way to collect data about the body, right? Do you have a vision in the future that some of your tampons won't just be diagnostic, well, not really tampons, but that there'll be probes that deliver drugs in a personalized way as well as the diagnostics? Wow. Would it be the same device? And it wouldn't necessarily be during periods, would it? That doesn't.
Yeah, so a big part of what we had to develop in order to make the pain relieving tampon is a system, a manufacturing system that enables us to add an active ingredient, to atomize it, and to ensure that it stays on the outer layer of the tampon so that it doesn't permeate inside the absorbent core. And that's actually quite challenging to do because tampons are absorbent, right? They want to soak things up. So we have to develop a protective sleeve which maintains the absorbency of the tampon from the top, but then from the sides where we have contact with the vaginal mucosa, that's where we can release biofilms and all sorts of medications. And that's very much part of our vision going forward. One other commonly known example of vaginal drug delivery is the abortion pill. So this is not yet clinical practice in the UK, but in the US it very much is. And so it is in Australia as well. You can take the exact same formulation that you take orally, vaginally. And it works in 7 hours rather than 38 hours, with significantly fewer side effects and a 2% higher efficacy rate, which may not sound like a lot, but in this context, it's actually quite significant.
Hi everyone, Tania here. Just a quick favour. We'd love your feedback. If you have a moment, it would be great if you could give us a star rating. It helps others to find our podcast and means we can continue to get brilliant guests for you. Now, back to the good stuff.
God, it's fast. So maybe we'll switch then. So this idea of the tampon as a diagnostic tool, or the work that you're doing in terms of a device for the vagina. Because I don't know if, again, what you think is based on your platform, from what I've read and heard about, so you're looking at, is it HPV, cervical cancer, vaginal microbiome and STIs and endometriosis? It's quite a wide gamut. I mean, maybe if we start off with vaginal microbiome, right? Because I think everybody's talking about the gut and the gut microbiome, but I think people are less familiar, right, with the vaginal microbiome. Do you want to maybe just explain to us what it is, why it's important, and what you're doing about helping women understand it better?
So the vaginal microbiome, the easiest way to think about it is it's like the immune system to your entire reproductive tract. And it's important, the vaginal microbiome is important in a number of different reproductive health functions. So if you have a disrupted vaginal microbiome, you are more likely to contract an STI. So you're more prone to chlamydia, you're more prone to HIV. You're also more prone to recurrent vaginal infections such as yeast and bacterial vaginosis. And lastly, the vaginal microbiome can sometimes contain pathogens which can be toxic to sperm or can make it harder for a fertilized egg to implant itself. So the vaginal microbiome also plays a role in recurrent miscarriage, preterm labor, as well as a low likelihood to have a successful IVF outcome. So it's really important that we familiarize ourselves with our vaginal microbiomes because they may contain the answer to why we've had this persistent painful vaginal discharge or why we've had 3 or 4 recurrent miscarriages.
And also just in layman terms, just for the audience, basically what we're saying is we need to be testing for viruses, bacteria, and yeast and pathogens. And my understanding is this is correct, that also isn't it like the vast majority, like even 80% of some of these infections in the vagina are completely undetected, right? They are asymptomatic. So that is the concern. And unless you do a test, you don't know what might be wrong with you, if anything at all.
Yeah, so this is particularly true for chlamydia. 70% of female chlamydia cases are asymptomatic. And this is a big issue when it comes to infertility and chronic pelvic pain. I always say this, even if you are in a long-term stable relationship, you should still get screened proactively because the consequences of having, undetected bacterial vaginosis or undetected chlamydia can be quite significant.
Yeah. So then fast forwarding to what you've created at Daye, what is it that you're doing that's different in terms of the microbiome testing, and is it already available for consumers, and how does it work?
Yeah, so we screen for 25 different pathogens, high-risk HPV strains, chlamydia, gonorrhea, trichomoniasis, which are the most common STIs, as well as the most common vaginal infections like bacterial vaginosis and candida. And then lastly, we, using quantitative PCR, we can measure your overall lactobacilli count. The way in which the vagina is self-cleaning is with these lactobacilli agents. The lactobacilli, however, they are sensitive to a lot of the, lifestyle factors that we're all engaging in, whether it's smoking, alcohol, eating a lot of sugar, certain forms of contraception as well can also destroy your lactobacilli. And most importantly, use of antibiotics and antifungals. So those thrush pessaries that we use in order to cure our yeast infections, they kill pathogens indiscriminately. This means that they kill the good bacteria and the bad bacteria. That's why a lot of people find themselves in these recurrent cycles of recurrent vaginal infections, because the treatment that you take, yes, it does kill off the bad pathogen, but it does also kill the good lactobacilli.
So lactobacilli, I think people are probably familiar with that, right? Because that's what you have often in a lot of Greek yogurt and active yogurt, and it's one of the most common probiotics. So it's one of the good bacteria. So you're saying it's the same in the vagina and the gut. So in terms of, obviously the probiotic supplement market's going crazy. And if women who are concerned, if they're taking probiotics already, are they in some ways, they don't need to worry about the vaginal microbiome, or there's not the evidence that it is helping to repopulate those good bacteria?
When choosing a probiotic supplement, it's important to confirm that it has been tested for its ability to survive the acidity of the gut or its ability to survive the acidity of the vagina if you're using a vaginal probiotic. And then the other important thing is probiotics need to be freeze-dried in order for them to reach you alive. So freeze-drying is a technology that effectively puts the lactobacilli to sleep, and then they reactivate once you've ingested them. So I guess the third thing to consider when looking at the probiotic supplement is, has it been clinically tested? And then the other thing to check is, has it been clinically tested with that specific strain that the company is selling, or that specific strain combination, or are they just quoting kind of generic papers that have nothing to do with their specific formulation? Vaginal probiotics can be really helpful if you have a tendency to recurrent vaginal infections, or if you've just taken a strain of antibiotics a course of antibiotics, which will kill the good and the bad bacteria indiscriminately.
And I think the very clear and simple message here is that all women listening to this should get a vaginal microbiome screening. I'm literally thinking I need to go and do one right away, right? Let's switch, I suppose, to endometriosis, right, which is another issue that I know that you're looking at closely at Daye. I mean, would you just talk us through a little bit what endometriosis is, how it's linked to menstruation, and I suppose what you're doing in this space as well?
Endometriosis happens when endometrial-like cells start growing in places where they shouldn't be growing. So this could be inside your uterus, around your ovaries, around your fallopian tubes.
And sorry to interrupt, but just to explain, endometrial cells are around the lining of the uterus, right? Just
yes.
So
yes.
these are now found in other parts of the body. And we don't really know why, do we? Why they're developing?
We don't yet know why. So the way in which we have traditionally diagnosed endometriosis is with invasive surgery or laparoscopic surgery. In some cases, some patients do find relief from having the endometrial growth removed, so surgically removed. But this is very challenging to do if your endometriosis is not visible during a laparoscopic surgery, which is sometimes the case, or if it's in an area that's surgically inaccessible. I believe we're now focused on believing the patient, believing their symptoms, and then trying to help them manage those symptoms.
Yeah, I mean, just to pause you, just to make this clear, like this is crazy again, right? What you're saying, laparoscopy is a keyhole surgery, right? You're saying people need surgery to go and see if somebody has endometriosis. Like you would have thought, I mean, I don't know again with MRI or also with, maybe better, there are other ways or biomarkers. That's kind of what we're now looking at. And again, it feels like this is just an area that's been neglected for too long, and maybe with better research, we should have got there a while ago, right? But on a positive note, are we beginning to get there, particularly with, say, blood biopsies with biomarkers?
There are some saliva and some blood biomarkers with impressively high levels of sensitivity and specificity. So much more diagnostically accurate compared to the laparoscopic surgery. The other thing that I find quite encouraging as a trend is for a long time, we used to think that we shouldn't tell women, especially if they were younger, we shouldn't tell them that they have endometriosis, even if we know that they do. Because if you tell a woman that she has endometriosis, supposedly, she will go on Google, she will Google endometriosis, she will find out that people with endometriosis may sometimes have a harder time conceiving, and then she will go away and have unprotected sex and become pregnant, then you're going to have to deal with this woman's unwanted pregnancy and, potential abortion care. So I'm glad that we're at least having conversations about endometriosis, and, it's recognized as a significant condition that greatly affects your quality of life, and we're no longer taking this very patriarchal view that, we should police women's bodies and police their reproductive choices and, only give them snippets of information based on what we think they can digest at that period of time.
So it's encouraging on the diagnosis front. What's your vision, or where do you hope we'll get to, say, in 5 years' time with endometriosis? Do you think we'll have more treatment options, and what part is Daye playing within that?
So in the next 5 years, with the help of AI, we will certainly have developed novel molecules, which will, novel non-hormonal molecules, which will help people manage their endometriosis symptoms without experiencing the side effects from hormonal contraception, or manage their endometriosis symptoms while also trying to conceive. The role that we're currently playing in endometriosis is through the period and pelvic pain clinic. We significantly speed up the time to diagnosis. And again, based on the philosophy of we trust your symptoms, we will give you the right diagnostic tools, but we don't necessarily need you to undergo laparoscopic surgery. And then again, we build those personalized pain and symptom management tools, which enable you to feel prepared in different situations of your life when you might be facing endometriosis pain. So one of the tools that we recommend as part of the endometriosis care package is from a company called Onut, which creates these silicone rings, which you can apply on your partner's penis, and you can build them up so you can have 1 or 2 or 3. And they don't affect sexual pleasure, but they can limit the pain that you experience during penetration, because a lot of endometriosis patients, especially those that have a later stage endometriosis, may have frozen pelvis. So penetrative vaginal intercourse can be incredibly painful.
Just explain, how do the silicone rings work? You put them over the penis during sex, and then how does it help with the pain?
So it prevents how deep the penis can enter the vaginal cavity, which then for people that have pelvic pain or have a frozen pelvis, can be very helpful in limiting the pain. And also it enables you to feel more in control because you choose, how deep the penetration should go. And the benefit of the silicone rings is because they're soft, they're malleable, they don't affect the sexual pleasure for either of the parties participating. Another similar tool that we've sourced is a sex cushion. So you can position your pelvis on this cushion during intercourse, and it helps you move your pelvis around to the position that you find less painful or least painful. There are many tools available out there. Again, like I love
Valentina, how you're like mixing the medical and the lifestyle, because that's also what we try to do at LV, right? Like you don't just want to be medical, because yes, some things need a medical solution, but there's also a lifestyle solution. There's a sex solution. There's you're sort of looking at it in the way we need to, which is obviously based around women. That's really incredible. I suppose thinking about our two companies, actually, obviously we're looking at different issues of women's health, but there are so many similarities, and you've sort of touched upon a few of them, talking about obviously the policing of women's bodies, and also the taboos. And I think another key issue that we've had, I mean, there's many, right? Challenges. I'm saying issues, I'm being polite, but we could talk about fundraising as well. But I think a key one really that both of us, that we've discussed together, is the issue around marketing and advertising, right? That it's still very difficult to be advertising and marketing specifically female gynecological products, right? Do you want to just talk us through your experience in this area and what we see happening and any changes? And particularly, I suppose, we're talking about with Meta and TikTok and so forth.
Few people know this actually, but you can't talk about any women's health topic, whether it's menstruation or breastfeeding or pelvic floor health or period pain. You cannot talk about these topics on Meta, Google, TikTok, Amazon without facing bans. And the other thing that's really important to remember, so say Daye wants to submit an ad about our water-soluble tampon wrapper. So we have an ad where someone holds a glass of water and they dissolve the tampon wrapper, and we illustrate how the packaging is more sustainable compared to just using plastic. Meta brands this as political content because they think that anything to do with women's health is either political content or adult content. So they block this ad. But not only do they block this ad, they then also restrict our profile. So our profile is penalized when you have multiple ads that get banned. The rating of your profile gets reduced, which it's a endless buildup of constant restrictions of being able to reach your audience. So you have your ads blocked, your account is restricted, and then the other thing that they do to penalize you for talking about women's health, which they consider to be sexual or adult content or political content. So I really can't emphasize how great the barriers to entry in the femtech space are. And investors are not familiar with this. Most consumers are not familiar with this. And at the same time, the other thing that's even more frustrating is you can talk about erectile dysfunction all day long if you want on Meta, Google, Amazon, TikTok. You can advertise Viagra, which, it is, I feel, a lot more related to sexual content than breastfeeding or menopause or menstruation. So it's a very sexist policy. And the thing that I discovered recently is that this type of policy, this approach to women's health advertising is not only limited to digital channels. So we tried to run an ad about our diagnostic tampon for chlamydia on TfL, so Transport for London. A lot of our ads got rejected because we were showing a anatomical plastic model of the ovaries and the uterus and the vaginal canal in order to show where the tampon goes. TfL said that this would be offensive. A biological model that's used in medical schools. They felt that would be offensive. And then when we ran an ad which featured our tampon, just a hand holding the tampon across London, we had it on bus stops, etc. Members of the public took it upon themselves to apply stickers onto the tampon because they felt the tampon was not suitable to be shown, to be displayed in a public space. And I said, well, you do realize this is an ad for a tampon. That's why it is front and center.
I mean, I'm nodding my head here and kind of slightly smiling because I didn't know what else to do. As in, everything you're saying is so familiar for everything we do at LV as well. And exactly like you said, things getting banned for adult content, for example, breastfeeding for showing too much skin and so on. It's a real problem. I think the more that we as entrepreneurs in this space can just keep publicly complaining about it, right? And just keep knocking on those doors until change happens.
Yeah, we will do that, but it's absolutely exhausting. And just the barriers to entry are insanely high.
Yeah. But if you could go back to when you were 24 and you started the company, would you do it all over again?
Oh, I often think that. I think so.
You're supposed to just say yes without pausing.
No, but it's very hard. I mean, I don't want to be the type of person that doesn't inspire other people to start companies, but I also want to be very honest about what it's really like to be an entrepreneur, because I don't think anyone was really honest with me. Because usually when you speak to people that you maybe don't know so well, they're not going to be as candid. I was actually 22 when I started Daye, and I guess if the question is like, would I do it again? I think so, because like when you're 22, it's the perfect age, I think, to start a business, because you have no idea what you're getting yourself into. You have a lot of naivete. And I think in entrepreneurship, you need to have some level of naivete, and you need to have just like this crazy level of optimism in order to not get knocked down by the constant punches.
No, you're absolutely right. And you're right to say that, because I think you do need the optimism, you're right, and the ambition. You have to be ready for failure too, right? And that's the bit that you never really, people don't think through. They always think through like how great it's going to be if it succeeds. And you've got to also think through, what if this fails, and how will I be financially, and all the rest of it. And not everybody can always take those risks, right? And maybe when you're 22 you can, or for me, I was actually the opposite. I was a bit further along in my career. So I thought, well, if it fails, I know I can come back into my career. And so on. There's so many factors, which is, you're right, like the portrayal is just like this lone entrepreneur taking a giant leap, and everybody should just take this leap. And if you just have faith, it's going to work. And you need to be thinking through all the support factors and so on. But I suppose that's also partly why we call the podcast Skin Like a Rhino, because there's also, and I know particularly in women's health tech, and I know you've had this, you've already applied it, but so many people telling you, this doesn't make sense, this is the wrong product proposition, this is the wrong team, you're the wrong person. I mean, everybody just telling you you're going to fail. What has helped you kind of develop that Skin Like a Rhino?
I mean, to be honest, I think for me personally, it just comes from I come from a very hard family childhood background. I had to learn to be independent at a very young age. I was the fourth child for my dad, and my mother was very, very young. So neither of my parents really wanted to have a child, which meant that I was kind of left to raise myself. And any decisions that I had to make around my education or where to take my life to, I always had to make them very independently. So I think because of that, I was kind of uniquely prepared for, all of the slaps that you get when you're an entrepreneur. And I was uniquely prepared for just the ambiguity, the risk, the pain, and just needing to rely on yourself. Mm-hmm. And now I've grown and I've matured, and I've learned, okay, I need to preserve my own energy, and I need to look after myself in the best possible way, so I can show up as the best possible version of myself. And one of the best pieces of advice that I've received about entrepreneurship is you have to think of yourself as as an elite athlete, because your physical body is under a lot of pressure, your mental health, your cognitive performance is under a lot of pressure. So you have to build a very strong surround system of support around you with, therapy, coaching, exercise, just whatever it is that works for you. You have to be religious about ensuring that you book the time and you keep, as cliched as it sounds, just pouring into your own cup.
I can sort of understand what you're saying about that sense of, that you're obviously somebody who's very independent and a self-starter. And I was surprised, when you said that you had lacked self-confidence in the early days, but you must have, there's something that you obviously had a strong vision, right? And a strong sense of that you had to prove that you could do it, right? Is that sort of needing to prove to everybody that you could do it, or did you know you could do it and you just had to go after it?
The other thing that I'm really motivated by is just injustice. Like, injustice really pisses me off. It makes me angry. And I feel that one of the greatest injustices in the world is just how we've been gaslit into thinking that the women's health experience we get today is normal. So it's like I have this like constant anger about the women's health experience that fuels me with ambition to want to change it.
In some ways, even though, we wish we weren't in that place, I'm just thankful that you are angry about that, as I've also been angry about other issues in women's health. And I'm so happy that we're on this journey together. And it is hard, but you're doing incredible things, Valentina, honestly. Like what you've done with Daye is, like I told you, like we had this conversation at LV, like, could we use, the vagina as a diagnostic? Could we use LV trainer, right, as a diagnostic tool? And we just sat back, we're like, this is going to be so hard. It's so hard from a science point of view on how to do it. It's so hard to get uptake. And you've just kept breaking down all those barriers. And you've also expanded and done so many different things. It's really, I'm just so impressed. So thank you, Valentina. And thank you for joining the show. I really appreciate it.
It's very mutual, Tanya. Like you've led the way, and I've been so inspired by the way that you structured Dayve and the way that you've inspired your team and served your customers, and so thank you, really.
Oh well, no, but it's a lot of work to be done, right? But there's enough of
it's always day one.
We can be optimistic. We can still be angry. But we can still,
I'm very optimistic. I still have that naivete.
Thank you, Valentina. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Skin Like a Rhino. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a moment to leave us a star rating. Your feedback means the world to us and helps others discover the podcast. Until next time.